Welcome everyone. Nick Wagner Sr. It's Sunday night at 8 o'clock, so I'm back with another episode of the Full Potential Podcast. Harry, I was off for a couple weeks over the summer, took some vacation, but I am back with you, another fantastic guest, so thank you for making time, sir. I appreciate it. And almost every Sunday, Harry, I bring on a variety of different guests that have had really unique careers, like yourself, to share their journeys, because I am a big believer that other people can learn a lot from your journey and what you've done and with your life and your career, where you've been successful, where you haven't, what you've learned from that. And I love hearing people's stories. So I'm really excited to hear yours. So Harry Moser, founder of the Reshoring Initiative, welcome to the Full Potential Podcast.
Great to be here, Nick.
And we have a lot to talk about. And I am not Joe Rogan, so we will not go over 2 hours, but we will jump right in because I want to hear all about how you ended up running a nonprofit focused on reshoring manufacturing jobs to the United States. So I think it's going to be a really cool journey. But I want to first talk, Harry. I want to go way back to when you were a little Harry, when you were a little kid. Was manufacturing something that was like in your family that you always wanted to do when you grew up? Like, was this something that you knew was your destiny, this world of manufacturing, or was this, or did you want to do something else when you were a little kid? What was that job you wanted to do when you were growing up?
Manufacturing. It's been in the family. I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is right across the river from New York City. And the biggest thing in town is Singer sewing machine. That was the original primary factory of Singer was there back in around 1900, 1910. It was the largest factory of any kind in the world. 2,500 people, 2.5 million square feet, just a huge a monstrosity for the day. And my grandfather was a foreman there. My dad ran about a third of the factory. I worked there summers from 14 to 22 or something like that. So I've been doing it forever.
and knowing that, knowing you had family that was a part of manufacturing, as you grew up, was it something that you saw they enjoyed and that you thought it would be a good career for you, and they like, brought you into work at a young age and kind of pushed you in that direction, or were you just naturally interested and curious anyway?
I'd say at first it was a job. When you're 14, 15, a job's a job. And I was too stupid to go out and have fun. I worked every summer, all summer long. And, but I got exposed. I worked in a different department every summer, got to know different things about manufacturing, machining, heat treating, what have you. And I liked the people that were there. They were really solid, good people that worked in the factory. And of course, my dad had a big influence on me, and it was important to him, so it was important to me. So, yeah.
Now you ended up going to MIT for mechanical engineering and engineering, so BS and an MS. But I want to ask the question because was it your choice to go to school, or were your parents pushing you to go to school? Because I'm going to guess if you were working in the factory since a young age, you probably had opportunities to just go work when you were done with high school and not necessarily need to go to college. What was that discussion like in your household growing up?
I think in our case, it was just assumed I would go to university, and and I chose and got chosen by MIT, so that made it easier to do, and I had a scholarship, and so I think the assumption was that I should go there, but I was about the top of the high school class, and generally that's what they do. That's what our culture teaches you to do, I'd say. But I think we'll get into skilled workforce later. But for an awful lot of people, now something like an apprenticeship can be a very good alternative, especially in comparison to, say, majoring in sociology or anthropology or basket weaving or early something studies kind of thing. For those, if that's the alternative, then the incomes are dramatically higher with the apprenticeship.
Yeah, no, and I know we'll talk about that because I know that you're passionate about that whole topic as well. But MIT, great school, and I know that you it looks like you got 2 degrees while you were there. So not only did you go to a great school, you were an overachiever and got 2 degrees in 5 or 6 years,
5 years.
5 years. So you went first job out of school. You went for what some probably considered then and still considered today one of the greatest manufacturing companies in the United States, General Electric. So how did you end up at General Electric, and what did you do in that first, which I think is a very pivotal job out of college?
Mhm. Well, GE had, probably still has, something they call the manufacturing management program. So in effect, you were being trained to be the factory manager or the vice president of manufacturing, or something depending on how big the place is and how good you are. And it was very good. They started here. I was at Large Steam Turbine Generator, and almost the birthplace of GE. These big turbine generators, huge things, and worked there for a year in Schenectady, again, essentially the home of GE.
Mm-hmm.
And then they moved me out to San Jose, not bad, and to nuclear energy division, and pretty sexy, So then I was there for 6 months, and it was all going very well. I was very happy. And then MIT came to me and asked me to come back and work for them. And that sounded like a really good idea, so I went back to MIT.
Yeah, it's interesting because at a very young age you went back to work in higher education, which I think is something a lot of people do. I think maybe further on in their career, but you did it really. You were still pretty young right out of school.
24, 25, something.
Yeah, and I'm gonna read the actual name from your LinkedIn. So. Industrial Liaison Officer and Assistant Director of Industrial Liaison. So tell me what you did for MIT and why they called you to do this role.
I guess one of my professors obviously recommended me, and so they brought me back. The function liaison, French word, is to be a bridge between two things, to bring two parties together. That's what a liaison does. And so my function, and there were 6 or 7 of us, liaison officers, and our function was to connect various large companies with MIT. So I dealt with Siemens and General Motors and various companies like that. And in today's dollars, now this was what, 55 years ago, 53 years ago. It's a long time ago, ancient history for most of our listeners. Okay. But so in today's dollars, those companies probably pay $100,000 a year each. You have somebody like Harry, come to them, find what technologies they're looking for, what they need to know about economics, about finance, about whatever, and then find work being done on those fields at MIT and send them papers, invite them to conferences, or get the professors to go out and visit the company and have discussions. So it was a way of creating synergies between the companies and MIT. And in exchange for that, MIT collectively got millions of dollars each year, and their professors got visibility. And I got to know MIT better and to know the company. So this was good.
Yeah, it's a really unique role, especially for someone so young in their career. And I know you did that for a little over 3 years. And I think you bring up a great point. I think the relationship between the colleges and universities and higher education and the companies is so important. That link is so important, which you just talked about. So that was MIT was probably ahead of their time doing that way back in the late 60s and early 70s. So kudos to them. You then took another turn, right? So you went from working for a manufacturer, went back to you went back to MIT to do some work, and then it looks like you took another turn in a role where director of marketing and research and technical director for, I'm going to hopefully say it right, Disomatic. Is that how I say it?
Disomatic, they would say.
Disomatic.
Yeah.
And what and it says leading producer of foundry molding machines and related equipment. So this sounds like you went back to the manufacturing world from the higher education world. What made you go back and leave MIT?
I could have stayed at MIT. In fact, they offered me a job as like assistant director of the computer department, like where all the computers were that all the MIT people were using. In retrospect, might have been a great job to have been highly responsible for computers at MIT. And given that computers have done better than foundries over the last 50 years, I probably did not choose the right career move in that sense. Now, I also had an opportunity to I could have worked at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. They wanted some kind of a manager down there. That would have been cool to do, but for me, I think it was the right decision. It's interesting. Somebody in the machine tool industry once said, "Harry, what's an MIT grad doing in the machine tool industry?" I said, "Well, there's lots of MIT grads in aerospace and computers and things like that, but I'm just about the only one in machine tools. So sometimes it's better to be the biggest fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond."
No, I mean, look, I think you bring up a great point. I mentioned to you earlier, we have a lot of early career people that listen to this podcast. You had a lot of options for what where your career was going to take you, and if you had gone the MIT computer route, you might not be leading the Reshoring Initiative today, right? So it's like what's behind door number 1, 2, and 3. You just never know, right? So you've had an amazing career. So, but I think you bring up a great point that always take a look at the different options and do what's right for you, which is what it sounds like you did. When you went back to the private sector and did this marketing research and technical director role, you did various roles after that, all in manufacturing. I'm kind of curious, was there a specific part of manufacturing that you really liked? I mean, you mentioned machine tool, but you did so many different jobs, Harry. It various companies, from research to technical director to aftermarket sales to business planning. Like, what was your biggest takeaway of all these different types of jobs? Was it you just kept learning every single one you did? Like, what did you love about that?
I love manufacturing because it's real. Because at the end of the day, there's some object, something you can hold in your hand that's been created, and someone's going to use it and get value from it. So I like the tangibility of manufacturing. And again, the people have been consistently wonderful. I've been involved in various trade associations, the National Tooling and Machining Association, Precision Metal Forming, American Foundry Society, Association for Manufacturing Technology. Wonderful people, across the board, hardworking, America loving, so to speak, committed to the country, efficient, technologically competent. It's just been a wonderful. Now, if I'd been in plumbing, or some, probably the people there are equally good, in their own way. But I love my tribe, and part of my success was that the tribe has liked me, and so I've got thousands of friends in the industry. So like we have AMT puts on IMTS. It's the machine tool show every even year in McCormick Place in Chicago, and they in 2018 they had 130,000 attendees. So it's one of the biggest shows of any kind in the country, and there's this bridge sort of corridor between two buildings you walk over, and when I was still president there at Charmy, I'd walk across that, and maybe 10% of the people I knew, every 10th, they'd say, "Hi, Harry," "Hi, Bill," "Hi, Sue," and that's a wonderful feeling to know a huge number of people like that, and for them to appreciate what you do, to think that that you bring value to them and to the society, and so I'm rather self-actualized. I could sit here for weeks, not talk to anybody and work and be happy doing it. But there's something to be said about the confirmation that you get when other people tell you that what you're doing, that they think it has value, and that they appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you mentioned Charmy, which is the company that you were the president of for, I think it was over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is interesting, and I want to hear about that because you had multiple jobs at multiple companies across the country that got you all sorts of different experiences where you eventually ended up at Charmy as the president. And, I'd love to hear a little bit about like, what was it like being the president of a company? How big was it? And what, well, we'll start there. What was it like, being president and how big was the company?
Well, when I came in 1985, it had gone through a rough patch. They had just moved from Long Island to outside Chicago, and inventory was a mess. People lost. It was just horrible. Not taking good care of the customer at all. It was bad, and I got there, and it was like half as big as the headhunter had told me that it was. It was bad, but good people, still a lot of good people, and good product and improving product. And in some ways, I was there at the right time, but I put my focus on the customer. Certainly, the employee. You always have to have without the employee, you got nothing. But finally, to get the employees to focus on the customer. And so over my whole time there, I probably spent a third of my time in the field all over North America with the customer. And at first it was, tell me what we're doing right, tell me what we're doing wrong. And I heard an awful lot about what we were doing wrong. And then I come back to the company and we'd fix the things that we were doing wrong. And then we'd start to measure everything. How are we doing on answering the telephone? How are we doing on spare part shipments? How are we doing on training of our service engineers, training of the customer, et cetera, et cetera, and tracking and posting and documenting and making that data available to the customer, but also to the sales force to use to sell, and to the employees to see it, so they knew that it was part of their job to achieve those good results. So when I started, we were either number 7 or number 8 in the industry in North America. And within about 6 or 7 years, we were number 1. So we went from way back in the pack to being number 1. And now corporate came out with really good product, really good machines, and we hired some wonderful people, and we had a great set of distributors, and things went right. But so I think when I started, sales were maybe 18 million a year. And when I retired, they were 100 something million a year. So it was very nice, very nice. The best time was 1998. That was just a booming year for the industry, for the country, for machine tool sales. And in December, we were having a price increase January 1st. And in December, I'd be walking past the sales office, and the fax machine was just spitting out orders coming in. Every couple piece of paper was another $100,000 of business coming through. One of the things we did very, very well, I think, since it was growing, just growing like this, every time we had a record bookings week, every employee got something, $50. I don't know what something. And every time we had a record bookings month, they'd get $100, and every time we had a record booking year, everybody would get, I can remember, $200, some numbers sort of like that. And so everybody was always, what do we have to do to get, how are we going to make it?
So I know a lot of my listeners probably don't know what the machine tool industry is, Harry. So what kind of products were you actually making, and who are you selling them to?
Okay, so just for background, a machine tool is a mechanized device into which you put something, typically a block of metal, think maybe steel, maybe aluminum, and it changes the shape of that hunk of metal either by cutting away some of it or by bending it and forming it.
Yep.
And there's like 10 different processes depending on exactly what it's doing. But the idea is to, back thousands of years ago, people would take a file and do this to make something, and then we had manual machines where you'd turn handles and things to make things move. But eventually you have computer controlling where the tool goes around on the workpiece and moves the workpiece and comes up with this really complicated shape. Think of portions of a jet engine, for example. So specifically, Charmy, where it gained its fame initially was EDM, electrical discharge machining. So there's wire EDM, there's die sinking EDM, wire being the biggest category, and the wire is used, for example, to cut out the die and the punch, so you could stamp out something like a fork. There's to make a fork. There's a die that has the shape of a fork, and there's a punch that has that, and one's like a male and a female comes down, bump, and there's another fork, so to speak. And then the sinker was used to create the openings in a plastic injection mold. So you have an injection mold, has cavities, and you pump plastic into it, and it creates a shape, a Barbie doll, something, a cup, something. And so the machines were used for that, but initially, and then for medical devices like implants and jet engine components and nuclear weapon pieces and all kinds of things like that. So very hard metal cut to very exacting tolerances.
So super high tech, mostly high tech manufacturing.
Yeah, but I mean, some of it was very high tech, but some of it was most people would say injection molding is medium tech, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
wonderful industry. We had great people, and again, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you had an amazing experience being the president of this company for quite a long time, and took it from, like you said, not doing very well to doing fantastic. So I think that was obviously an awesome experience. You retired in what was it, 2007-8 timeframe? Do I have that right?
I stopped being president around 2007 and became chairman, and then chairman emeritus, or emeritus, some people would say, and like honorary chairman. And as such, I phased out. I no longer had operational responsibility, but I do projects and studies and research and help them with customers and things like that. And that took me through to 2010 when I fully retired. I was off the payroll and entirely on my own. Yeah.
So I want to ask the question because I want to get to the whole topic of what you're doing today with your nonprofit. But I want to ask the question: you were the CEO of a company doing over $100 million in sales. You were an engineer by trade. How do you feel all your experiences and your education prepared you to be the president of the company? Like, do you feel like how did that go?
Well, I also have an MBA from the University of Chicago, so that provided me with
that helped
accounting knowledge and marketing and strategic planning and all that more managerial side of things, and the engineering obviously prepared me for the technical side of things, and then I've been fortunate to have a lot of good people to work with that helped me develop the relationships, because finally being able to deal with the employees, deal with the customers, provide to have them have confidence in you. I'll tell you a story. So I was at an NTMA conference, and I'm standing there talking to Bill, and Dwayne comes over, and Dwayne says, "Bill, don't let Harry take you to dinner." And Bill says, "What's the matter?" He's a nice enough guy, free dinner, makes sense. And Dwayne says, "Well, about 3 years ago, Harry took me and Shirley to dinner, and since then I've bought $3 million worth of his machines."
I laugh, but you seem to really understand how important the relationships were, and honestly, the people are usually the hardest part of most business. It's not the technology; it's the people. I mean, how do you interact, and how do you build the trust? So I love that story, and I love how you've always focused on the people with your employees first. I think that's a great lesson. But I want to ask the question. So you had this super successful career. You finally retired, and then you decided what? Like you couldn't just sit at home and do hobbies and just relax? You had to do something else. Is
Yeah,
that how it went? Like,
I'm much too energetic. You can see me bouncing here a little bit, kind of thing. So I just for background, I in a recent week and a half, I played singles tennis 8 or 9 days in a row. So I work out every day. I've missed 10 days in the last 20 years, kind of thing. So
wow.
I'm very energetic, very healthy, very and for me to sit would be, I'd probably collapse after a couple of days. Yeah.
So did you have the idea for the Reshoring Initiative before you fully retired? Was this something that you had been planning and you were like, I think this is where I want to take my career next?
Yeah, actually, maybe 5 years before then, starting when I was still running the company, I developed strategies to help companies decide how to avoid China. Here's what China's good at. Here's what they do well. Here's the kind of products they're good at. Here's the kind of products you should go after, and the methodologies you should use to succeed in these other categories. And so I did that and got some nice attention with that. And then I said, well, no, let's got to be a little more aggressive. We got to figure out how to take the work back from China or from other countries that had taken it from us. And and that's what reshoring is to offshoring is to make the product somewhere else to supply the U.S. market, and reshoring is to once again produce it in the U.S. for the U.S. And so I said, well, that sounds like fun, and so I started that up maybe halfway through the chairmanship, and incorporated it maybe a year after I fully retired, and then gradually brought on part-time people, to help. And again was blessed to have the support of those trade associations I mentioned, the AMT, NTMA, PMA, AFS, Gardner Publishing, various groups like that came on and said, yeah, sure, we'll help, and did either money or pro bono support of some kind, and they were enthusiastic and supportive, and so I just kept building it and growing it. No, it's still not huge. It's not, there's nobody's getting rich on it, but we've been blessed to have the results that we've had. Yeah.
And now, I want to clarify a couple of things. So you are a nonprofit. So the Reshoring Initiative is a nonprofit from the research I did, and you have multiple people that work for you. So I know you're the president and the founder, but you have multiple people that work at the organization to help with the nonprofit. I appreciate you describing what reshoring is, because I was going to ask you that question, because most people probably did not know that. So thank you. What is the goal of your nonprofit? So if you meet someone at a trade show, or you meet someone and they're like, Harry, what does the Reshoring Initiative do? How do you explain that to someone in the industry?
Our mission is to increase U.S. manufacturing by 40%, which would mean increasing the number of manufacturing employees in the country from 12 million to about 17 million, so about 5 million jobs. And we picked that number because that's how many it would take to have a balanced trade deficit, to eliminate the trade deficit, have balanced trade. So the trade deficit is your imports minus your exports, and the difference is if you import more than you export, then you have a trade deficit. Otherwise, you have a trade surplus. And the U.S. has a trade deficit that's almost 1 trillion. That's $1 trillion per year, and that's about 5 million jobs worth of output. So we set that as a target, and we identify the jobs that have come back either by reshoring, which is done by a U.S. company, think General Motors, for example, or FDI, foreign direct investment, which is done by foreign companies, Toyota. So either of those, if they decide to produce in the U.S. instead of producing somewhere else, then they've brought jobs to the U.S., and then we count those. And the sum of all those that we've counted in 2010, in that year alone, 6,000 jobs were announced. Last year, 2020, in the year, 160,000 were announced. and
Wow.
this year we expect 200,000 or more. So it's been a more or less continuous uptrend like this, and we're certainly not the only factor causing it, but we're probably the most visible factor that has made this a trend within the country.
So, what is I want to ask this because I think it's gonna be an interesting answer. What is the typical day for you leading this nonprofit? Like, how do you make this happen? Because I'm gonna be honest, Harry. This seems like a monumental undertaking to try to move the needle on this. Because
Yeah.
to your point, for so many years, companies were sending jobs out of the U.S. from a manufacturing perspective, and you're trying to bring them back. And I know that
Not trying. Remember what Yoda said to Luke Skywalker when he was trying to pull the fighter out of the muck? He's, don't try, do. So we're
do.
doing it.
So yeah. So what does a typical day look like for you? Like, how do you make this happen?
Typical day. Let's say weekends are easy. I just work because nobody interrupts me. I don't get many emails. I don't get telephone calls. I normally don't do podcasts on the weekend.
I appreciate that.
So weekend, 10 hours a day, I just work. I get caught up on all the stuff I didn't do during the week. On the weekdays, typically I'll have maybe 4 scheduled Zoom meetings, telephone calls, Zoom meetings with various people that want to talk or that I want to talk to about cooperation, about sharing, about us getting some money somehow, doing something, helping them achieve their objectives. So maybe have 4 of those, and then get 100 emails that have to be answered, and maybe 500 that don't get answered, that are junk, the junk stuff. Yeah. And so sorting through all those, and going through. I get lots of newsletters from like trade association, SME, and Industry Week, and and you go through this, and almost everyone mentions a case of reshoring or a case of foreign direct investment, and then I send that on to Miller, who's in charge of the library, and she takes those and she puts them into the library so that we get our 160 or 200,000 jobs that have been identified during the each year, and so a lot of writing. We write 1 or 2, maybe 3 articles a month. Have a wonderful team member, Sandy, who typically drafts them, and then I edit them, and we send them out. Have a column called Moser on Manufacturing, which is in Assembly Magazine, in Fab Shop Direct, and Industrial Heating. And we also put articles into Modern Castings and other magazines. We periodically have articles in Industry Week, which is quite a big time national journal. So we're writing, editing, talking, doing webinars and podcasts.
And I believe you were part of President Obama's insourcing forum, and according to your bio, a member of the Department of Commerce Investment Advisory Council. So you get involved at the government level as well, it sounds like.
Yeah. The way I think of it, the reason we offshored so much is that U.S. manufacturing cost is 15-20% higher than Germany's, 40% higher than China's. So companies, when they look at that, say, of course, I got to go there to get it, kind of thing. And so my job is, despite that disadvantage, to help companies see that maybe 20 or 30% of what they import, if they do the math correctly, they will bring back. And so that's 90% of what we do. And then 10% of what we do is advocating with the government to convince the government to take actions, policy actions that will reduce those price disadvantages relative to those other countries. Things like getting the U.S. dollar down. Mm-hmm. U.S. dollar is exceptionally high because we're the reserve currency. That drives up the dollar. We say take it down. Get that huge, big increases in students going into apprentice programs and credentialing programs, rather than everybody going on to university without much care as to what they're studying, so to speak. Keep the corporate tax rates low so the after-tax return on investment is high. Perhaps have a value-added tax that would almost every other country has, and puts a 15% tax on everything being imported in addition to duties, and we don't do that. So there's a series of things like that we advocate to the government, and so far they haven't exactly done, but that we continue to advocate.
I'd love to talk a little bit about the idea of not going to college or university and attending a technical school or becoming an apprentice. Because one thing, Harry, that I think I've noticed, I'm in Connecticut. We have a huge manufacturing industry in Connecticut, and there we have a hard time filling jobs. We have a lot of baby boomers that are retiring, and a lot of our younger generations do not want to get into manufacturing, either because they don't know about it or they don't understand the opportunity. So share a little bit about some of the work you do in that front on helping people, understanding what opportunities there are and apprenticeships and things of that nature.
Uh, I put a lot of the blame on the U.S. government. About 8 years ago, Department of Labor invited me down to tell them how to get the workforce ready for all the jobs I was going to bring back. Okay, so we're in the Department of Labor Secretary's conference room, and they said, "Okay, tell us what you've got." And I said, "Well, first the department has to stop being part of the problem and become part of the solution." So I had their attention.
I wonder how that went over.
They show us, and I pulled up one of their websites, and I'm sure all of you have seen it. It shows it's a bar graph, horizontal bars like this, and it starts with no high school, community college, some four-year, master's, PhD, and income going up with number of degrees. And it was headlined "Education Pays." And I said, "I thought you were the labor department. You're responsible that we had to have the manufacturing workforce that we need, and you're responsible for the apprentice program. Why doesn't this say education and training pay, and have the average income of an apprentice graduate in here along with the bachelor's and the master's degree, and see that the apprentices make as much, and therefore the guidance counselor, the student, everybody said, wow, that's a good alternative." And they immediately folded and did more or less what I wanted them to do. Okay. And yet still there's dozens of pages on their websites and the Department of Education websites that suggest that education degrees is the only way to get ahead, rather than acknowledging that training can have equal or greater results. So there's a lot of study done by a Professor Carnival at Georgetown. He's got a center that looks into this. And he has data that shows that apprentice programs income is better than several of the degree fields in a bachelor's degree, and that a 5 or 6 credentials can often pay as well as a bachelor's degree. I know there's a program down in Kentucky associated with one of the automotive companies, and their apprentice graduates 5 years out of the apprentice program are averaging, I think, $97,000 a year, wow, which is only $2,000 less than the average for PhD holders. Okay, so I'm not saying every apprentice gets that. I'm sure automotive pays better than other, but there's no question that I did a study once, and I compared a tool and die apprentice to an English major, and the tool and die apprentice started to make money at 18, right out of high school, whereas the English major didn't make money and paid tuition. Right? And then I had the incomes for each. The tool and die maker always made more throughout his career, a little bit more. I paid half the difference in taxes, invested the other half at 7% per year. And at the age of 49, the tool and die maker had $1 million more than the English major. But how many guidance counselors have ever told their students that is a viable alternative to just going off to university and studying something and getting a degree? Because everybody who gets a degree is going to make more money than everybody who doesn't get a degree, which is just patently false.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a great point, and I'm glad you're talking about this. I think it is really important. And I think, at least what I've seen, I think we are seeing a shift where a lot of companies are no longer requiring degrees, and I think you're seeing more people talking about what you just said, apprenticeships, and technical college and community college and certificates and other options to for your colleges and universities because the cost is so high. And I've had people on this show that have been super successful with no college degree, and I've had people on the show that have been super successful with a college degree. So I mean, to your point, right? I mean, there's a lot of options out there.
I've got a cute story for you. I was giving a speech up at University of Wisconsin Platteville, and there was a fellow there from Milwaukee Area Technical College, which is a community college, a big community college, but training technical things. And he was very proud of the fact that his community college is the second largest graduate institution in Wisconsin, because only Madison, the main campus for University of Wisconsin, has more students who had already gotten at least a bachelor's degree and are students at the facility. So thousands, I guess, of people in Wisconsin who have a bachelor's degree of some kind, typically in a liberal arts field, are coming back to Milwaukee Area Technical College to get a degree in auto mechanics or tool making or something else, so they can actually make a living.
That's really interesting. I mean, I think the interesting thing about manufacturing is it's obviously changed over the past 100 years. So manufacturing it's super much of it like what you were doing, super high tech, like very very safe, right? A lot of people think manufacturing, they're like, oh, how safe could manufacturing be? A lot of the manufacturing facilities you go to today are super safe, super clean, super high tech. So I think that image people may have of what manufacturing was is not what it is today. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's certainly exceptions. I mean, there's law offices, little sloppy law offices somewhere, and there's dirty restaurants, and there's a few factories that aren't great, but there's most factories to get good people and keep them today. It has to be very nice. Just reminds me of this cartoon that I often use, and it's a restaurant, and there's four guys working in the kitchen, and the youngest one, they're all smoking cigarettes or something. They all got beards and long strigly hair, and the kid is working in the sink, and he's obviously complaining. And one of the older guys turns to him and say, "Kid, stop complaining. All of us have PhDs in English literature."
No, I mean it is. I bring that up because I think it is important for people to realize that manufacturing has changed quite a bit, and for a lot of people out there, we hope they do consider it as a career. So I do have a couple questions before I always close with my same question I always ask everyone. If people want to get involved, Harry, with the Reshoring Initiative, what is the best way to get in touch with you and your organization?
Info at reshorenow.org. Our website is reshorenow.org. So you go that, and there's a contact page where you can send a question in, do whatever. We're always looking for, like, if any of you out there have the time, we're always looking for interns, unpaid interns, unfortunately, but someone where we can find some interesting, challenging, rewarding kind of activity that might have a good place on your resume for having done something interesting and creative like that. So we're delighted to hear from people. The other thing they can do, if they're working at a company and the company has reshored, we'd love to hear about it. Or if they hear the company's having problems with its imports, we can't get the pumps from China because of the cargo ships that aren't getting through, kind of thing, Well, then say, why don't we buy them here or make them here? And the boss will say, because it's more expensive here. Have you looked at the total cost of ownership estimator at the Reshoring Initiative? It'll turn out that if the prices are within 20-25%, probably it's more profitable to get them here.
Very interesting. Well, and the other thing, Harry, we'll include your LinkedIn profile in our show description, and we'll also include your website for the Reshoring Initiative as well, so people can see it there. So I always close with the same question, Harry, which is, what is the one piece of advice that you would give my listeners that's helped you reach your full potential throughout your career? So you've had a really successful career, both in the private sector, in the higher education field, and now as a nonprofit founder. What is that one piece of advice that you'd share that's helped you be so successful?
So what helped me get there that they might learn from, huh? So for me, relative to most people, I'd say I'm going to have to say two things. One,
That's fine.
be good with people, be nice to people, and they'll be nice to you. Is one. They'll help you succeed at what you want to do. And then two is work your ass off. So for the last 35 years, I've worked 60 or so hours a week, and most people don't want to do that. That's okay. But and then at least for the 40 or 45 hours a week that you do work, really work hard. Maximize the results for yourself, for your company. And if you do that, if you're seen as the person that's the go-getter, that's hungry for the next task, that's got the energy to get the job done on time, you're going to get ahead. Be honest, be good with people, work hard. It works.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And I mean, I think clearly you have no lack of energy because even during retirement, you're working 7 days a week and playing tennis and still keeping active. So Harry Moser, I really appreciate you making time to join the Full Potential podcast. Fantastic career journey. I love where you've been and what you've done and how you're focusing your efforts now with your nonprofit. So I want to just say thank you for making time. And again, we wish you the best, and we'll make sure to link to your website and your LinkedIn profile.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody. Good to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.